what it is that the president had said, who has said that, well, his salary should not be raised, and that of his deputy, and equally those ones that are at the top of the cadre. And of course he said that, well, this adjustment should be done on those ones that are on the lower bit of the cadre. But then SRC Mengich says that, well, this is basically what is expected of them, and therefore then there was need for conversations so that then they can as well listen or abide to what it is that the president has given as order. Why court threw out Ruto's 50 CASs? I'll be looking at that, just trying to highlight some of the reasons why, and we all witnessed that declaration yesterday. And Justices Kanyi Kimondo, as well as Alim Visram and Hedwig Ongundi, so perhaps just speaking or alluding to this. And accordingly, they say the newly created office and fresh complement of 50 had to comply with the Constitution and the criteria set out early on Okia Omtata's case in order to be lawfully established. And of course, they did comply. Well, for the avoidance of doubt, the entire complement of 50 CASs is therefore unconstitutional, and we'll be looking at that as we continue with the broadcast. And also, the nation speaks to this good, bad, and ugly on the question of the health survey in the country, and equally alludes to the Saba rally that is expected from the Right Honorable Raila Odinga's side, and also speaks to the question of crime. Police hold 4 over Akasha murder bid, and that is a story that has been there for quite a long time. Police in Nairobi are holding 4 suspects, all Sudanese nationals, following an attempted murder of Mr. Akasha Nuri Abdallah. That is a brother of the Akashas who are jailed in the United States. And we'll be following up as well on this one to give you updates in relation to the same. But that is what we basically have on the papers this morning. Please allow us to go through what it is that we have worked on. More or less also the same stories. The Shanzu Court in Malindi, through Senior Principal Magistrate Yusuf Shikanda, has released Paul Mackenzie's wife, that is Rhoda Mumbua, on 100,000 personal bond and 300,000 bond with a surety of the same amount. Meanwhile, other suspects will be detained for 30 more days as investigations continue.
Approximately 2 months after her detainment, Rhoda Mbua, wife to controversial Pastor Paul Mackenzie, can breathe a sign of relief after the release from the state custody.
Rhoda Mbua Mweu ataachiliwa kwa bondi ya binafsi ya $100,000 yeye atasign, na zaidi ya hayo pia atahitajika kuleta mdhamini wa kiasi cha $300,000 ili kuachiliwa.
Rhoda had been named a person of interest in the case against the controversial Pastor Paul Mackenzie, who led cult that killed hundreds of people.
Washukiwa hao wa 101 wa mwaka huu, akiondolewa mshukiwa 7 ambaye tayari ameaga, watazuiliwa kwa muda wa siku 3 ili kupatia upande wa mashtaka nafasi ya kuwasilisha maombi yote mengine ambao wangehitaji.
However, with the release, the court has ordered that she shall be required to visit a police station when called upon to do so. Paul Mackenzie and other suspects will, however, still remain in custody for more than 60 days pending completion of investigation. Rhoda has been in custody alongside her husband and 16 other suspects, and the next phase of exhumation at Shakahola Farm are set to begin. So far, 338 bodies have been found. Daniel Kihoro reporting for TV47.
And a somber mood has engulfed Gishonjo village in Kirinyaga County after a 47-year-old man killed his wife on a Sunday night and proceeded to, that is after a quarrel over sold beans. And of course, he is being held in Kiamutungu police station pending appearance in court, as Rhoda Matiani details.
It is gloomy here in Gishonjo village, Kirinyaga County, following a recent incident that happened on Sunday night of a 47-year-old man who murdered his wife. There was tension as the police rescued the suspect from the jaws of the irate residents. James Kariuki, a neighbor, narrated how he heard commotions and screams coming from the suspect's house at 9:30 p.m.
Huyu ni jirani yangu mwenye ameua mtu. Mnamo saa 3:30 za jioni nilikuja na nikapaka gari yangu nikatoka kwa gate venye nilisikia kuna makelele nje.
Kariuki had a glimpse of the two fighting, with the suspect demanding to know where the deceased had allegedly sold his beans.
Nikapanda mpaka hapa juu kwa majirani, kwa jirani wangu, na ndiposa nikasikia wanaulizana maharagwe. Kaulizwa maharagwe umeuza wapi?
At a maize plantation behind the kitchen, a pair of shoes could be seen, revealing there was a struggle. According to Alexander Mugo, a village elder, the two have been having constant quarrels to a point that he advised the deceased to pack her belongings and leave the suspect's home.
Na walikuwa tu na furugu. Walikuwa wanakaa na furugu huku nyumbani. Hata kuna wakati mwingine waliniita nikakuja kama brokolile nikawasaidia, nikaambia huyu bimbi toa vitu zako uende. Na akatoa manguo zake na akaenda kufika hapa Kishonjo. Siku 2 ama 3 nikasikia wamerudi.
Harrison Dambiri, another village elder, blamed alcoholism and drug abuse as the major cause of domestic violence and murders in the region.
Ningependa ama maoni yangu ningependa hao watu wadogo hata wale wakubwa hii kitendo isitendeke tena hapa, na kwa vile mimi naona ile kitendo inatendeka sana, inatendeka sababu ya pombe. Pombe hapa asubuhi watu wanakunywa sana Kisonjo. Asubuhi. Hii warika hii ya mtu ambaye ameua huyu mtu, hii rika ina kunywa pombe sana.
The body of the deceased has been moved to Kibugi Funeral Home while the suspect is being held at Kiamatugu Police Station. Rhoda Mbatiani, TV 47.
Now, 62-year-old mother of 6 from West Pokot County has shocked many after it was known that she was giving her children and grandchildren sleeping pills in substitute of food. Decrying the high cost of living, the vegetable vendor is reported to have narrowly escaped death after overdosing before neighbors came to her rescue, as Andrew Juma reports.
Jane Naliaka, a vegetable vendor from Kapenguria. Her children and grandchildren are lucky to be alive following an alleged overdose of sleeping pills for 2 consecutive days.
Kukula kwangu ilikuwa ni jirani alisaidia kukula. Nikafika mahali ikakuwa ngumu tena, nikafika kuamulia kwamba ikikosa kabisa nilikuwa napea watoto Piriton ili wapate usingizi.
Naliaka narrates her woes, talking of crippling cost of living and debt, a battle she has failed to win, given her meager earnings from the only source of income, vegetable vending. She speaks of the desperation that led to the choice to drug her family with sleeping pills.
Kwa siku tunakula mara moja kwa sababu ya hali ngumu ya maisha ambayo tunapitia. Tumejaribu panda shuka hakuna, mpaka imefikisha mahali penye kwa siku tunaenda tukikula mara moja. Tukishakula jioni tena tutakula jioni nyingine.
Meals have not been the only nightmare to find for Naliaka. The children under her care have since not been attending school. Neither has she been able to pay rent for the past 6 months.
Nimekuwa nikiwapea hiyo Piriton kwa muda fulani ambapo imefikia mahali watoto wenyewe hawakuwa wanaweza kwenda shule. Kwa shule kama wameenda siku mingi walikuwa wanaenda siku 3.
It took a sharp-eyed neighbor to notice that Naliaka's children were missing from the neighborhood play group, a rare incident. That was what broke open the heartbreaking circumstances faced by the family.
Anapewa watoto Piriton 2, yeye mwenyewe amemeza 3 na ikawa. So alimeza Piriton siku 2. So siku ya 3 ikakuwa ngumu, ikashindikana. That's why tulikimbia, tukamrisk. Jamii mzima, plot hapa ikachanga kidogo, sukari kidogo, nusu, unga dini. Na hivi ndo maneno vile iko.
Well, that story was produced by Andrew, voiced by Moige. Now, the just released 2022 Kenya Demographic and Health Survey report has revealed, among other things, that about 1/3 of Kenyan households are headed by women. In the rural areas, 36% of households are headed by women compared to 31% in the urban areas. The report further revealed that 43% of women agree that a husband partner is justified in beating wife for specific reasons.
Some troubling revelations from the 2022 Kenya Demographic and Health Survey report.
43% of women aged between 15 to 49 agree that a husband partner is justified in hitting or beating his wife or partner for specific reasons. And you can see them there. For example, for burning food. Can you believe that? Okay. For refusal to have sexual intercourse with him.
Other reasons given include arguing with the husband, refusing to cook, going out without telling him, coming home late, neglecting the children and being unfaithful.
Kuna kupiga ila kurekebisha na kuna mambo mengine hawezi rekebisha kwa sababu imepita kurekebishwa ni kuenda inastahili aende hata kuna haja kupiga yeye.
Kama mwanamke amekosa, unamwambia polepole kuja tuongee, mnaongea kama mwanaume.
The number of men who have been physically assaulted by their wives dropped from 12% in 2014 to 8% in 2022.
Ukipata kwanza mwanaume amepigwa na mama kwa nyumba, aidha mambo ni mawili. Aidha huyu mwanaume ameolewa ama atekelezi majukumu yake ya nyumbani kama baba wa nyumba.
The most common committers of physical violence among women who have ever been married or have ever had an intimate partner are their current husband or intimate partner, followed by former husband or intimate partner.
34% have ever experienced physical violence by any perpetrator since the age of 15.
The most common committers of physical violence among women who have never been married or have never had an intimate partner are teachers, mothers or stepmothers, and fathers or stepfathers.
Now, the Kenya Association of Manufacturers has called on the government to consider manufacturing edible oils locally instead of importing. The stakeholders have decried that importation will deal a blow to local industries and further increase losses, as Flora Limuki details.
Just a few days after the High Court suspended a decision by the government to import 125,000 metric tons of edible oils, stakeholders in the manufacturing sector, led by the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, have called on the government to create a level playing field in the interest of all stakeholders and the general public. The government approved the decision in November last year in a bid to stabilize prices after a prolonged drought that led to a shortage of household supplies and higher food prices. Recently, the Cabinet Secretary for Trade, Moses Kuria, has been on the hot soup after a media expose claimed that 5 companies, that is Bidco Africa, Golden Africa, Menengai, Pwani Oils, and Kappa Oils Refinery Limited had been enjoying a monopoly at the expense of the taxpayer. However, while appearing before the National Assembly's Committee on Trade, CS Kuria distanced himself from the edible oil importation scandal, claiming that cartels in the edible oil sector are apt to tarnish the image of his ministry. The Kenya Association of Manufacturers has now recommended to the government to consider and engage other stakeholders so as to promote local and regional competitiveness. Flora Limuki, TV47.
And the Presidential Task Force on the Legal Framework Governing Religious Organizations Monday held a public participation meeting with members of the clergy and the public in a bid to decide whether churches should be regulated or not after the Shakahola incident, as Chichi Josephine details.
With a proper
In the ongoing aftermath of the Shakahola deaths, a major debate began on whether or not churches ought to be regulated. A presidential task force took that debate to the people. These task forces are the moment wrapping up their series of public participation meetings and is set to table their findings to the president once done with their countrywide report.
Tunazunguka kaunti zote 47 tukisikiliza maoni. Tumekuwa leo Wasingishu na kwa kweli wametoa maoni yao. Tumeyasikiliza, ni maoni yao Itafika wakati ambapo tutaketi chini kama jopo na kukusanya maoni yao yote.
However, before the report comes out, a section of the clergy are concerned over what they see as the undermining of religious integrity by the church's involvement in politics.
Tuna uhuru wa kuabudu, lakini tumeanza kuangalia kwa mambo ambayo yanatendeka hapa na pale katika taifa letu. Ni kama kitengo hiki cha dini kimeanza kupoteza mwelekeo, na tunahitaji mtu wa kutuambia kama tumepoteza mwelekeo.
Serikali na dini lazima kuwe na hiyo separation. We cannot have a state church.
What is actually happening is that people are out for money. And that's the thing that is driving, other gospel ministers to do errors like the Shakahola issue. That one, we say as a church, it has gone beyond what should have actually taken place.
Elsewhere, Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi urged the church to be key drivers of peace in the country and support the government's initiative of uniting Kenyans.
It is gratifying that the Quaker Church in Kenya is working on a peace curriculum to be integrated in the national education curriculum. This is the way to go in influencing national discourse now and for posterity.
Attending the 2023 World Conference of the Friends Church at Kabarak University in Nakuru County, Mudavadi advised Kenyans to be on the lookout of the emergence of false prophets and preachers.
It's very difficult to comprehend when somebody is a professor and they actually surrender all their years of work, abandon their families, and then follow a false prophet who has not even been to class 1. It beats logic. So where have we gone wrong as a society?
The Prime CS further called on the religious institutions offering theological courses to combine these courses with other skills-based courses in a bid to produce all-round graduates that will help in boosting the country's economy.
We may need to double up the theological component with 1 or 2 other skills so that that pastor, that preacher, will not just pass the word of God, but will be an extension officer on matters of economy and skilling the congregation that they go to.
Chichi Josephine, TV47.
Now, 6 years after the government implemented a ban on plastic products, it appears that the action acknowledges that the issue extends beyond the distribution of these items within the country. The primary cause lies in the import of plastic products from foreign countries, which has hindered the government's efforts to combat the situation. Our reporter Isaac Famba has compiled the following report on that.
6 years since the government banned the use of single-use of plastics in Kenya, environmental problem caused by plastic bags are still an issue getting in the way of an environmental conservation and recovery efforts across the country. Trans Nzoia County is one of such areas the finger of blame is being pointed as plastic bags are used in wrapping and packing goods in market which is believed have been illegally imported from Uganda, a country which does not have a similar ban on single use of plastics as Kenya.
Because we are on the border, people are smuggling them, and it is very challenging to deal with the transboundary trade. Most people, especially in the rural area, they are still using because these smugglers tend to sell this paper to people who are in the rural trading centers.
Tunakuwa na changamoto kwa vile karatasi hizi bado zinapenyeza kupita kwenye mipaka na zinatufikia. So labda ni ombi langu ya kuwa serikali iweze kushirikiana na serikali nyingine za Afrika Mashariki wawe na ile legislation ambayo itapiga ban karatasi hizi za plastiki katika nchi zetu zote za Afrika Mashariki.
Despite the efforts made by Environmental and Management Authority NEMA, vegetable and fruit vendors have been named as the main users of plastic bags, with many ignoring the ban and continue to use them in the market.
Yeah, there are those who are using, especially Mama Mboga, they still using these paper bags. And we have been doing some surveillance. Those who we find still in possession with this plastic, we normally apprehend them and take them to court.
Isaac Famba, TV47, Trans Nzoia County.
And away from that, the Ministry of Health has highlighted plans to implement findings of the Kenya Demographic and Health Survey report released Monday in order to ensure every Kenyan has access to quality healthcare service in line with the Universal Healthcare Coverage Program. Jackson Chacha reports.
Despite the efforts of the national government to implement the Universal Healthcare Program, the gap between Kenyans who are able to afford quality healthcare services and those who are unable to afford it is widening. In its finding, the National Bureau of Statistics has noted that poverty is the main challenge towards the achievement of universal healthcare services. As one way of dealing with this, Health Cabinet Secretary Susan Nakhumicha has announced the plans that will drive her team moving forward in ensuring that they implement the positive side of the report.
My ministry is spearheading the government's commitment of accelerating the attainment of universal health coverage. To optimally do this, the use of relevant and up-to-date data is a key requisite to enable evidence-based decision-making.
On the National Health Insurance Fund that has reported a low uptake, CS Nakhumicha has noted that she will continue cracking the whip on members of the board for them to facilitate service delivery to Kenyans.
This data has provided a good background for reforms at the National Hospital Insurance Fund as we structure how best to implement universal health coverage through primary healthcare networks. Actually, Professor Ndungu, now I have the confidence to stand and say I must clean up NHIF.
To the finance part of its implementation, the national government allocated 141.2 billion Kenyan shillings in the 2023-2024 financial year to the health sector, although from the findings of the report, there is a lot to be covered. While responding to this, National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Professor Njuguna Ndung'u has said that the government will collaborate with the Ministry of Health in actualizing the findings of this report.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me assure you that the government, through the National Treasury, is committed to allocating more resources, and I dare add, when they are available, to programs that will improve. Let me say, I am a realist. I don't promise things that are not there. So more resources, once they are available, they will be allocated, and that will help us improve the quality of life for the Kenyans.
With now the report at hand, it is the responsibility of both levels of government to implement its findings. Jackson Chacha, TV47, KICC, Nairobi County.
And a Nairobi-based lawyer has gone to the High Court seeking to bar United Democratic Alliance UDA Secretary General Cleophas Malala and other leaders from regularly attending cabinet meetings convened by President William Ruto. Have a look.
In what could lead to another running in with the judiciary, President William Ruto's decision to allow 4 individuals to attend cabinet meetings could be dealt a blow after a lawyer challenged it in court. The lawyer argues that this move by the UDA party is unconstitutional and seeks to establish a parallel government structure. The petition also highlights that the leaders, including Malala, already hold significant positions within President Ruto's administration. According to the lawyer, UDA Secretary General Cleophas Malala, Chair of the President's Economic Council David Ndii, National Security Advisor Monica Juma, and Women's Rights Advisor Harriet Chigai, who have been listed as the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th respondents respectively, are already serving in other capacities under the head of state, further arguing that this raises concern about their simultaneous involvements in cabinet meetings. The lawyer further criticizes the recent decision to administer an oath of secrecy to the four at State House in Nairobi. The move, the lawyer argues, was made without the necessary involvement of the National Assembly. The lawyer's petition highlights the alleged violation of several constitutional provisions, including Articles 212, 3, 10, 129, 130, 131, 132, 152, 153, 154, 156 and 258, which outline the substantive and procedural requirements of the Constitution. The lawyer has requested immediate attention from the court to consider the matter as urgent, considering that cabinet meetings take place weekly. President Ruto recently cleared Chigai to attend cabinet meetings, championing women's interests, while Malala was assigned the responsibility of advocating for the UDA party's manifesto during decision-making processes. Eric Matika, TV47.
And still in the corridors of justice, President William Ruto has once again faced a significant setback from the judiciary as the High Court invalidated the appointment of 50 chief administrative secretaries, deeming it unconstitutional. And as Mike Aguongo reports, a three-judge panel of the High Court stated that the government failed to adhere to the prescribed rules for establishing these offices. The ruling was delivered by the majority judges, Justice Kanyi Kimondo and Alim Visram, while Lady Justice Hedwig Ongundi dissented.
The appointments by President William Ruto were quashed this afternoon at the Employment and Labour Relations, dealing a big blow to the head of state and his administration. The appointments were challenged by the Law Society of Kenya and other interested groups. President William Ruto had earlier administered the oath of office to the 50 CASs after the National Assembly declined to vet them, claiming it lacked the legal authority to do so. The judges ruled that there was a degree of reasonable public participation in the recruitment of 23 CASs, but there was no public involvement in the constitution of the 27 additional office holders.
That the processes towards the establishment of the said office was in contravention of the Constitution, as well as sections 27 and 30 of the Public Service Commission Act, which succeeded. The court as such declared the office of the CAS unconstitutional.
That the fourth respondent failed to undertake compulsory public participation in the process that resulted in the enactment of the SRC Remuneration and Benefits of State and Public Officers Regulations 2013.
The judges further ruled that even though the Court of Appeal had preserved the original office established by former President Uhuru Kenyatta in January 2018, the newly established office and its complement of 23 custodians could no longer take advantage of that suspension after the Public Service Commission abolished the office.
For the avoidance of doubt, the entire complement of 50 CASs is therefore unconstitutional.
However, Justice Ongundi argued that establishing the 23 posts was done according to the law, but adding the 27 in the Gazette notice was unconstitutional.
Based on the reasoning set out above, we do not think that it was the intention of the framers of the Constitution to have 50 CASs deputizing 22 cabinet secretaries.
PSC urged the court to save the 23 by suspending its decision as they move to the Court of Appeal.
We are definitely going to the Court of Appeal. We hope the justice will be served.
Kuna hii judgment ambayo imefanyiwa leo. Kuna ile judgment ilifanyiwa na Monica Mbaru. Kuna ile ilifanyiwa na Mrima. Sasa tunajiuliza, kwani koti zinatoa maamuzi tofauti?
The appointing authority, as we speak, is at liberty, even today, to appoint 23 CASs of his choice. But we will still be exploring the appellate option for purposes of clarity in law.
But the petitioners in the case, led by Eric Theory of LSK, opposed the application, saying the formal application should be filed so that responses can be filed.
But irrespective of what happens,
I think it is very clear to all and sundry that the courts of this country will rise to the occasion, and indeed should always rise to the occasion when violations of the Constitution, and such serious violations of the Constitution, are perpetrated by the executive.
Catherine Wanjiku Waruguru.
The saga continues.
Now, the ruling leaves President William Ruto with lots of questions crisscrossing in his mind up to whether he will defy the court's order like his predecessor did in January 2018, with the only answer lying in the hands of the Court of Appeal. Mike Kagwango, TV47, from the Milimani Law Courts in Nairobi.
Our story by Mike Kagungo forms the basis of our conversation this morning. Please interact with us. Tell us, what do you make of that declaration by the courts and what is likely to play out, and generally if these CASs that plan to go to the Court of Appeal would get something out of it. But away from that story, the ownership and administration of a 4,292-acre Mudera farm in Mau Narok, Njoro sub-county of Nakuru County has been a long-standing source of conflict. Various individuals have reportedly invaded the farm, asserting their ownership, which has raised concerns among the farm managers. Our reporter Chichi Josephine brings us the latest updates on this matter.
The controversial farm in Mau Narok is a part of an estate owned by the family of former Cabinet Secretary Mbiu Koinange. Francis Mwangi Njenga, one of the elected managers of the farm's activities, says the farm hosts more than 1,500 farmers who carry out various farming activities for economic growth in the area.
Shughuli ya shamba hili ni ukulima ambalo lina host wakulima zaidi ya 1,500 na shamba lenyewe limegawanywa katika sehemu kulingana na beneficiaries, lakini kubwa zaidi ni kwamba limeweza kuingiliwa na kuvamiwa kutoka kona fulani na ambazo watu wanadai kuwa wanalimiliki.
According to him, the farm has been subdivided as per the beneficiaries who are farmers in the area, as he quickly noted that some individuals have invaded the farm claiming to be the rightful owners, an issue that the managers have raised an alarm about.
Hakuja kuwa na dispute, huu ni uingiliaji, ni uvamizi ambao umefanyika. Kwa sababu shamba ni bayana, this is a private property, na ni private property ya Mbiu Koinange family. So there is no contention kwamba ni la huyu ama ni la yule, lakini kama vile watu wanaingia mahali kwa sababu ya interests na wanakuwa kwamba hawajaingia kwa njia ambayo sio sahihi, hivyo ndivyo establishment wenyewe ama shamba lenyewe limeingiliwa.
The move saw the managers call for a security meeting that eventually did not happen, as police from Mau Narok police station barricaded the main entrance to the farm.
Tulipokuja siku ya leo kwa minajili ya kufanya tu kikao hicho, tumepata vizuizi, tumezuiliwa kuaccess ama kuingia katika ofisi ya shamba hilo.
On the other end, John Kirago Macharia pointed an accusing finger to individuals whom he calls invaders of the farm.
Tuko na shida ya usalama kwa sababu hawa wenye walipewa hii mashamba na koti hawawezi kuingia kwa mashamba yao. Hakuna mtu anaweza kuingia kwa sababu akiingia huko anakuta kwamba kuna watu wengine wameingia huko.
They are now calling on the government to step in and ensure that security is enhanced for the local farmers who should be undertaking their activities on the farm.
Hatutaki vita sisi hapo. Kama kuna order yote kutoka kwa upande ya familia, tuingie kwa shamba, sisi tuko tayari kuenda kufanya kazi.
Tumekuwa na back and forth ya miaka kama mitatu serious. Wakati mwingine ilikuwa ni uvamizi na watu wanarudi nyuma, lakini sasa hivi ndio wamejitokeza na kudai kwamba shamba nzima na kwao.
Chichi Josephine, TV47.
Of that piece, that is from Nakuru County. Chichi, thank you so much for that. Allow us to take a quick short break. We come back with more. I don't know whether we'll call this baptism by fire, but yeah, you will gauge it yourself. Honorable Member of Parliament of Tigania West, Mheshimiwa John Mutunga, is here with us this morning for the very first time on Morning Cafe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for creating time.
Yes.
Why I say this is baptism by fire is because you were supposed to be 3 of you, yeah? The two other gentlemen are somewhere on their way coming here, but because you are here, we'll begin. And I think it's also a privilege for you to get a chance to speak to the people of Tigania. I think it's only fair, because then when the other gentlemen are here, we try to stick to the national issues and all that. But now you can say jumbo to them.
Correct.
Yeah.
Let me greet my bosses. I call them my bosses because they
they
put me in position.
They are.
And I think nobody other than the Tiganians can get me out of parliament.
That's
unless I do things that are out of the way. But I don't think I'll be party to that.
Yeah.
I want to greet them. I want to tell people of Tigania we are on course. We have a plan, and our plan is working. We're implementing it systematically, and we are in the process of revising our 5-year strategic plan to see what do we not achieve in the last 5 years. It's actually 10 years.
Right.
So we are at midterm. And midterm review is giving us things that we need to dig deep into and make sure that we deliver.
That's true.
So our plan is working, and I think we will be able to deliver based on the circumstances, of course, that affect all of us as a country.
Yeah.
We expect to do several roads. We expect to improve on electrification. We expect to increase more watering points to reduce the distances to the watering point. We expect to build our schools more, and we also expect to improve our agricultural production and productivity. These are the main pillars that we are working on.
Yeah.
Actually, there are about 5. We have education and training, which covers everything, from career development, from improvement of education, from improvement of the infrastructure at schools, even the roads, the playing grounds, and so on. Then we have the agriculture, water, environment, and land. Because agriculture operates on land, we need water, and then we'll finally improve the environment, because they are related as much. Then we have the other theme, which is infrastructure, covering electrification and road improvements. And we are targeting to have most of our roads opened now. Last session of Parliament, we opened quite a number of roads. Since the earth was, since we got a country, we've never had some roads in some areas.
Yeah,
so this time around, we opened up
on the forefront to speak so much.
We opened up quite a number of them, and now we are trusting that we shall be able to tarmac a few of them based on how the economy goes. Then we also improved a lot on water. Electricity, we were at 24% when I began as a member of parliament, but now we are beyond 45%. We did more than 5,000 households last session of parliament. This session we are planning and hoping to do another 4,000 or 5,000, which will mean that in 10 years we have done 10,000 households plus institutions. We are doing quite well. Then the other area we are trying to improve on is basically trying to reduce deviance, illicit brew, and then the drugs and so on. And that is also working, because we have formed what we call implementation units, and we have adopted the sublocation, having realized that the assistant chiefs in this country are not very busy. Apart from running after those who are, doing promoting deviance, they do not have a specific active role in development. We made them conveners of development fora. We created development fora at the sublocation level, and we called this fora. We got 5 individuals who are promoters. They are volunteers. One in charge of infrastructure, the other one in charge of education, the other one in charge of water, agriculture, environment, the assistant chief in charge of convening and reporting up and down, and then the final one in charge of youth, gender, and then we call it social welfare, where we look at basically the issues to do with groups that people are forming to develop themselves, the self-help groups, the merry-go-rounds, and so on. We've done several Arambes to try and support them to improve on the amount of money that they can roll out and the borrowing ability of the members. And so far, we have more than 600 groups that have been put together. We have clustered them at the sub-location level and formed what we call symbios, community-based organizations, and then put together these community-based organizations into a SACCO, Savings and Credit Cooperative Organization. And that SACCO now is the one which manages the symbios, and the symbios basically, on the other hand, are formed by the groups, and groups are formed by members. So we have put together more than 24,000, individuals within those groups.
Mheshimiwa, you speak huge for what a member of parliament is supposed to be doing. And I know there are no limits to what your office can handle, but we also understand what constitutionally you are allowed or you're mandated to do. Yeah. You have gone beyond all this, and I notice that you say we. Yeah. So who are these people that you're working with? A lot of lobbying and a lot of work, because then these are funds, these are quite intense, areas that you're touching on.
Yeah, I do not work alone. What I told my people is that given an opportunity to offer leadership, I went out of my way to identify people who are interested in developing our backyard. We formed, therefore, a Tigania West Development Support Group. And this support group basically encompasses anybody who is interested in joining us in figuring out development and supporting development in various ways, even giving out their resources. And we have a large group of more than 150 people. We meet once a year, sometimes twice a year, to review progress that we are making in development, looking at every area. For instance, in education, we decided that everybody goes back to their private schools. And then we did what is called alumni associations. These are the people who go to scrutinize on the performance of the school, talk to the teachers, talk to the students, talk to the parents, and make sure that the tripartite is working. Because if it doesn't work, then there's no performance you can get from a school. And then they also support them in terms of recognition, in terms of motivating the teachers, in terms of advising the students on career choices and development in the future. So it's still a concerted effort. It's not a one-man show. It's everybody who is interested in development in Tigania. And that is why it was very difficult for my opponents to beat me in the last election, because we were quite organized. And we gave them a run for their money. Finally give them a bullet. Clearly.
And I mean, if some of these things that you articulate are basically...
It's because we realize that actually people need development. Kenyans are looking for development. They are really not interested in how much noise you can make in parliament, how much you can insult in government or do all those other things. They're interested in having development. And that is why we thought as a people we need to focus on developing our sub-county or our constituency. And the efforts have borne fruits. We did a 10-year plan, which is 2017-2027, and it's working wonders.
All right, I am excited. I think after listening to you, I am tempted to say I'll take time and get to your constituency, or perhaps send my correspondence to
that would be useful.
As well, confirm that all this is happening. And I know that you also are touching on dockets that are specifically for, say, other entities. Does it not create a rift? If you speak of the roads, and I know to a large extent, as members of parliament, you're allowed to take that direction, but then what happens to the carers and the kuras? When you speak to some of these matters, waters and all that, where then is the role of the county government, in affording the people of Kenya this development? Because it's one thing to bring development to your people. It's another to make sure that the right channels are used. And I'm not saying that then yours is not a good channel, but then what happens to these monies that have been channeled down there for this very reason?
You mentioned carer, and this is how we work with carer. We have a CRC, the Constitution Roads Committee. That committee prioritizes the roads. It prioritizes which roads are supposed to be done every year. That committee has membership from my Tigania West Development group, support group, and the chairman of that committee is also the chairman of the Constituency Development Fund. So there is that harmony in terms of getting to know these are the roads that are disturbing us most. Therefore, we prioritize them for this year. On the other hand, when Kera does the roads, in the past there never used to be any supervision on the ground. What we've done is that the person in charge of infrastructure in a sub-location, and I know a road can pass through 2 or 3 sub-locations, the person in charge of infrastructure oversees what is being done on the road. So when Kera comes with their it's called the estimates, the engineer's estimates and the details of what needs to be done on a road, we make sure the person in charge of infrastructure in that sub-location is aware. And if it is crosses through 3 or 4 sub-locations, all of them are aware. So they hand over. Now, when they do the road, we have been opening up the road to the standards. First of all, we get the district surveyor to survey the road. Then we get the administration, either the chief or assistant chief with the support of the DCC, to make sure that they supervise the road, that the road is done. If it's 30 feet, it's done 30 feet complete. People have been investing or farming or even building on the roads. And then we have had to knock out gates to go through people's farms because they had basically settled on the roads. So the roads have been opened with the help of Kera and our person on the ground who is in charge of infrastructure overseeing. With the measurements is 30 feet. The beacons are not removed until Kera comes in to do the work, the contractor of Kera. So the contractor works with our person. When it comes to how much maram is put on the road, sometimes you see, of course, contractors can lie, can cheat. They can bring 1 lorry and then you have 4 or 5 heaps and then you count them as 5. In Tigania West, that doesn't happen. We count the number of lorries based on what is already in the deed plan. Now, I mean, in the bill of quantities, our person has the BQ. The Kera person has the BQ. The 2 of them, the supervisor of the roads from Kera and our person work together. They make sure that we have a lorry not covering more than, because Kera has provision for between 14 and I think 18 meters per lorry. We make sure that it is within that range. Even if they stretch it, it doesn't go beyond 18. And if you do that, you realize that you'll have sufficient maram on the road, and then the road will be done properly. So what we are doing in Tigania West right now is that the roads are done well. And a maram road can last for more than 2 years before we go back there. So we are able to go, in 3 years, we are able to go around the entire constituency doing all the roads. That's how we work with Kera. When it comes to water, we did 2 things. Number 1, we collaborated closely with the county government in terms of what they were doing. The last county government and even the current county government, we are working very closely. We identified the watering points in view of the distances people are covering to go and get water for their animals, for themselves, and even for the schools. Then the second thing I did, I wrote a request to the National Board of the Constituency Development Fund and requested them to allow me to use CDF to sink boreholes. I did 22 boreholes in Tigania West last session of Parliament using CDF money. I think I'm the first member of Parliament to do boreholes using CDF because it's not one of the provisions within.
And don't you think that can legally be challenged? And I mean, and you understand that very well, Mheshimiwa.
Yes. So what I did, I looked at the law, the CDF Act 2016. And then I realized that it covers a lot more of education. If a child is moving 7 kilometers to get water, to maybe pour on the classrooms which are earth, that's what we are trying to do now. I'll get back to that. If they are going to get to fetch water, they spend 2 hours fetching water, which they should have spent learning. The other Kenyan kids are learning. How can we expect Uganda West kids to be competing with those others? So they got my argument and allowed me to do the boreholes. So I've been doing boreholes in schools. I've been rehabilitating those probably that have not worked for some time. And we are reducing the distances from around 5 kilometers to around 3 kilometers now. We are moving towards 1 kilometer and then household. So what we do is that we sink a borehole and then we supply water to the school. If the school is as a secondary unit, we supply the secondary school as well. And then we give the community some taps outside the school gate, outside where the boy is, and we do a trough for the animal watering. So we contain everything. It's a continuum. Now, I requested the county government to do a lot more of boreholes in the community, and then I do a lot more of boreholes in the schools. So that concerted effort has significantly reduced the distance from watering points for our people.
Okay.
Now, collaboration. When we were doing our strategic plan, we invited everyone. The county government was represented, all the MCAs were represented, our people and the key opinion leaders were represented, and we did a very comprehensive plan which had commentary from everyone.
Okay. I hear you, and I acknowledge the contribution that you're making to society, but also to just understand the question of funding, because these activities then will not be run without proper funding, away from the CDF and away from what then the county governments perhaps would contribute and everything. Where else do you get the funding for this?
A lot more funding comes from the government. When it comes to maybe roads, most of the roads are done by the government.
Right.
That's all of them.
So yours is just to oversee, maybe as
oversee and
make
try
sure that
to basically lobby for such kind of support. Electrification is all purely done by government, and I think so far we are looking at possibilities of raising funds from outside Kenya. And through, of course, the various philanthropists and other agencies. And that's the second level at which we want to operate in this particular session of Parliament.
Okay.
Because we did not get a lot more funding from outside. However, we have a few private support agencies that are working in Tigania West. I have a few NGOs, and we have a few private companies. For instance, we have a private company called Windlab, which is preparing to invest more than 10 billion shillings in electricity generation. We happen to be, because we border Isiolo, we happen to be in a region where we are second in terms of the potential for wind and sun energy and the solar energy in the country, second from Turkana. We are the region that has the second potential, and this company has been able to identify that, and they want to invest in solar energy, the wind energy, and that is going to help us a lot, because they do a combination between solar and wind, and to do storage and sell to the national grid. So I think with the opening up of the issuance of the PPA, power purchase agreements, then we are likely to have this company moving on with the investments, because that was the entrance. Yes.
Let's come back to your mandate as a member of parliament, oversight legislation, as well as it's oversight legislation and representation, and basically what you mentioned, CDF, the question of security, as well as the question of education. How would you rate your performance as to how you have represented your people, and especially debates in parliament? And I know we have records of all this, but I'd love for you to speak to them, because recently there are those of you who are friends or are members of the Kenya Kwanza government that have been looked at as traitors based on the finance bill and now an act, and especially on the question of housing, which you supported so much so. And backing that by saying that you have proper understanding. Do you suppose that was the interest of the people of Tigania West?
I do everything with due reference to where I come from, and where my loyalty is purely is. When you become a member of parliament, and you are a member of the ruling party, and probably you have a responsibility like I do as the chairman of the Agriculture Livestock Committee in the National Assembly, then your responsibility becomes dual. Your loyalty becomes dual. You have to be loyal to the government and also loyal to your people. Now, in the Balancing Act, one of the things that is important for us to realize, and especially in terms of the housing, I am in record to have seen that in this country, this is the only country in the world where I've gone and found people living in paper bags, in polythene sheets, and they're human beings. And this is one of the countries where we have not taken seriously the need. You see, the basic needs are basically food, clothing, and shelter.
Yeah.
So we have not been able to feed our people properly. We need to put more effort in feeding our people. Secondly, well, clothing, we may say there is a possibility that Kenyans are well dressed because of mitumba.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is the main thing. But then when it comes to shelter, there hasn't been serious government effort to intervene in this particular area. And housing is an opportunity for the government to balance out, rather to even out the issue of shelter in the country. If you go to countries like even Tanzania, our neighbors here, you will not find people living in the kind of structures we have. We are a country which has extremes. We have extremely rich and affluent people, and we have extremely poor people. We are a country that is tending to, or has actually become, has opened up a tourism attraction in view of how people live. You see people coming to film Kibera and other slums to show. So it's not really a good image at all. On the other hand, when you go to our settlement scheme, the way we have settled as a country, and I want to speak now from the background of agriculture, we have been spread out. It's like we have been broadcast across the country. Of course, across the potential area where we can do agriculture based. That's where we are doing housing. That's where we are living. So in terms of housing, if you scatter people across the scope, these people will need electricity, they will need water, they will need a good road, they will need all the basic infrastructure and amenities for them to live well. If you look at countries that have planned their habitation well, they have planned their residentials, they have planned their industrial and so on, and you come back to Kenya, we failed significantly in terms of planning. Our planning department or divisions basically failed us. Because we should have, right from the beginning, designated where do we put up habitation, where do we put up houses.
Do we fall short of these houses, and what really is the essence of this conversation on affordable housing?
I'm coming back to answer your question. I'm bringing this background so that people can see. The reason why we support it so dearly, like I supported it. So it has two opportunities. Number one, to decongest agricultural land. If you go to Kisii today, we are built across the entire countryside. Kisii is one of the most potential land we have in this country. They get rain every afternoon. So they have no problem with crop production or livestock production. Now, instead of that, we are busy building on that land. So if we decentralized that and sustained that, the beautiful land and landscape for crop and livestock production, because we are a young nation. Young nation means we are more of younger people than older people. And we're increasingly having more of younger people. So where shall we take them when we build everywhere where we can produce food for them? Right now, we are not able to feed ourselves. We are focusing on ASAL. ASAL has got different user. We have potential land. We normally get sufficient water in this country to produce enough crops and livestock to feed ourselves. So it has one potential, the housing issue concept of decongesting agricultural land. Migration from agricultural land. What they are doing in Vietnam, they are basically going back to the people and telling people, now, this is your land, designed. If it is potential for potato production, and I'm talking about what I've seen, or for rice production, do you have to live everywhere? No. Set it aside for rice production, build around the corner where you have your houses going up. And then you have a school there, you have a playing ground for the kids, and a store for the rice that you're producing. From the storing of rice and increasing productivity on that particular land, they have a processor. They process that rice and package and so on and sell at the world market prices. So basically, they are able to employ their children using that mode. In Kenya, land is not valued based on the user. Land is valued based on the open econometrics.
I will.
We should have a law, and I'm bringing that bill to Parliament to designate agricultural land and other user land as such, and the value of land for agricultural land
and it's
will be
very
different.
important.
And when you buy land there, you have to use it for that particular.
And there are obvious, questions that will rise in relation to this, and of course, then you have a lot of homework to do. The last time I had a chance to engage the former CS for lands, one of the biggest problems that she highlighted the country has was on the question of land that is lying bare.
Yeah.
And the question was, how can we make sure that we put this land to use, even if it means then engaging the owners of this land, because there are people who own huge chunks of land that is lying bare, and the question is why. So even before we get to spaces where we'd say that this, we've put up structures on spaces where this would have been land and all that, there's virgin land, there's land that is quite organic and has not been tapped into. What is being done to make sure that that is tapped into before then we get into these spaces of housing? And if you'd listen to as well Okia Omtata in defense of why he has challenged, the conversation on the housing tax, if not levy at this point. One of the key things that he highlights is the fact that affordable housing is not about people owning houses. It is about the government making sure that even those ones that are renting are able to, rent at affordable rates and all that. Yeah. Don't you think then in this case we are somehow...
How can we reduce the rent if we do not increase the number of houses that are available around? The only way to reduce the amount of rent demanded by the investors is to have alternatives.
If people don't have alternatives, supply.
Yeah. So we increase the supply so that the demand will go down. And then the prices will be
we have acknowledged that, and I know there's a report that speaks to the population, and perhaps there's a worry that the population could go down based on the fact that nowadays people will prefer to have 3 children as opposed to the 90s when, 80, when people were largely talking about 6 children and above and all that. In a country where the population continues to shoot up, how can you say then that perhaps the demand goes down?
We have to increase the number of units we are realizing every year. If we do that, of course, other dynamics will come into play.
Yeah, right.
For instance, we are talking about family houses. And we are talking about units that are maybe 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, I think up to 3 bedrooms. So in this case, then, as you are saying, people are being compelled by the cost of living. The cost of living is the main issue. I have gone to a country where I found cost of living really working across the board. And in Kenya, it doesn't seem to work that way. This was in Norway. Norway is where we buy our fertilizer. That's where we buy some of the oil from. And Norway, as we were coming from the museum, I had gone to see where Wangari Maathai was crowned. And then as we were walking, and then somebody said, did you see that man? Yes. That's the Minister for Finance, riding a bicycle. Now tell me, would you ride a bicycle to this office? First of all, everybody will think you are mad. They will not respect you.
Right.
That was the Minister for Finance of a country which has a GDP which is about 100 times Kenya. That by then, Kimunya was the Minister for Finance, and he used to travel in a motorcade. So I think our priorities are extremely wrong. The cost of living disciplines people.
So in this case,
I don't think it is. We should lament so much about it. Let us see how we can make it work. Look at this economy. This economy needs to work. Right now, we have so much problems. We are borrowing a lot. The president has clearly said, we need to stop borrowing. We need to reduce borrowing. We always post a deficit budget. Our budget this year is 718 billion deficit. This money must be gotten from somewhere. We can't raise it from tax. We can't raise it from any other means. We have to borrow. Now, if we really want to be realistic and grow this country as Kenyans, we have to sacrifice. There is no gain without pain. We must feel the pain in order to gain.
Yes.
So let's focus on the housing issue. In my very considered opinion, I was asking in Parliament one day, let's look at the youths who are not employed. And tell them the condition for you to get a job is to sacrifice 15% of your salary to the housing scheme. Do you think they'll say no? Somebody who has been looking for a job for 5 years?
No.
Because we were there, we got jobs easily the day we left college, then we believe it is our right. It is also their right to get a job immediately. So if you give them a condition, you're going to get 30,000, you give 5,000 to the housing scheme. They will say, oh yes, please give us a job today. So we are unrealistic because we are in the situation right now.
All right, well, let's take a quick short break. Let's take a quick short break. I want to counter or, challenge that. But again, I'm glad that we have Honorable former Member of Parliament of Mwingi Central with us. And so I will let it for him to as well speak to this very matter. Zambia restructured its debt, and I know the conversation is all around IMF, China, and in this restructuring is a conversation of how can we pay, in small chunks for a longer period, loans that are already matured and all that. And so we ask ourselves, would that also be an option for the country? And in as much as we want to justify collection of tax, if it is challenged in court, then what next? So allow us to take a quick short break, Mheshimiwa, and come back with more. And former Member of Parliament of Mwingi Central, Captain Joe Mutambo, is here with us this morning. Captain, thank you so much for creating time. And he has joined us. I think now we can shelve Tigania West issues for a moment.
Thank you
At
very
least
much
we've already,
for that session.
Thank you so much as well. And as well, continue doing good for the people of Tigania. It's notable, it's something worth celebrating that when you go beyond your constitutional mandate, lobbying and all that to bring, development to your people. And Mheshimiwa, Senior here speaks to the need for Kenyans to go that extra mile in the payment of taxes so that, we are able to get ourselves off the woods, because we agree that we have a problem. And tax payment is one of the proposals that has been given to us. Also, restructuring of our debt is also a proposal that has been given. Yesterday I was watching news and I realized that Zambia has had a chance to restructure its debt and all that, negotiating for longer payments for, loans that are already, matured and all that. And he also goes ahead to say that if you meet a Kenyan who is jobless today and tell them that I'm going to give you a job and you will get a salary of 30,000, but out of the 30,000, we will take 5,000 to go to the housing levy or to go to the housing tax or something else. So we develop the government. They will agree because first of all, they are at a point of need, as opposed to all these other Kenyans who are working right now and cannot understand why the government should take more from what it is that they are getting in the name of housing tax and all that.
You see, what you need to get right is that governments across the world thrive through taxation. There is no other way of government to make money apart from taxation. Government make money through taxation. The only issue is that if I pay my tax, do I get the services which I deserve? That's the question we ask ourselves. We need to ask ourselves. And if I pay taxes, you know, in Kenya we are paying, let's say 16%. There are countries which pay 45% taxes. Taxes are all over the world. It's not only in Kenya. So that's not a new thing. The only problem we have in Kenya is that we have so much taxes which at the end of the day they amount to more than 50%. When you look at the levies people make, starting from business people. You know, it's not only the working class who pay taxes. Even the business people. Even the consumers pay the taxes because the moment you buy unga, the moment you buy sugar, you buy milk, anything you buy is taxed. So that is the problem we have, and I think that is where we need to put our thoughts. How are we taxing our people? Why are Kenyans feeling that we are so much taxed? I think that's the agenda we need to put on the table so that we can understand clearly. And these monies we collect, what do we do with it and where do we put it? Then number 3 is for Kenyans to audit themselves with the constitutional requirement. Okay? We have a constitution which is so demanding. Because the offices created by the constitution which we have today is too much for us to bear. And I've been saying this since time and memorial, and I have no apology to make when it comes to that, because I look at our wage bill. There is no country in the world which spends more than 70% on salaries. Our wage bill is so bloated. Why is it so bloated? Because we have so many offices which I don't think they are necessary for this country. Because we are a developing country. We have 2 parliaments. Ask yourself, and I said it here before, do we need the 2 parliaments? What is it that Senate is doing which National Assembly can't do? What is it that National Assembly is doing which Senate can do? Why can't we get our act together and say if it is the issue of representation, we have enough in the parliament and we share one house and we use one house? I want any reasonable member of Senate to tell me what kind of legislation do they come up with which helps this country.
Mheshimiwa, there could be validity in what it is that you say. But as you heard the CSs speaking yesterday, some of them alluded to the fact that they are Kenyans, equal Kenyans that deserve to get job opportunities. And therefore, you could say that fine, constitutionally, this office is not required. I mean, there are people who are doing a lot of jobs that, are similar in all that. So what happens to these individuals?
If you argue that way, then this country must create 50 million jobs.
Then that becomes a problem. Certainly not possible.
Is it possible? So if it is not possible, then why somebody feels that they are entitled and others are not?
Okay.
All right? So we create jobs for the purpose of need. Why do we have policemen? Because we need security. Okay, why do we have teachers? Because we need teachers to teach our children. Why do we need doctors? Because we need health. Why
do we
have
to oversee devolution?
Yes. Sorry? What revolution which cannot be overseen by the parliament?
The parliament, okay.
It is the same parliament actually which does the revenue, division bill.
Yes.
It is the parliament which generates that. Okay? There are bills which does not even go to to Senate.
Yeah.
We were here debating about the finance bill. Does it see the door of the Senate?
No.
No. And that is such an important bill for this country because that's what determines what goes where and who gets what.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
That is the finance bill is what determines how the money which we contribute as taxes is used in Kenya. It does not see the House of Senate.
Mheshimiwa, and particularly in this conversation on whether we need the Senate or not, you sit at the Parliament, and I'm glad for the second term, and therefore I'm sure you would be able to articulate to this matter. And I would not want to challenge what Mheshimiwa says because he's sat in that Parliament as well. And you know, you as a human being, you have no choice or you have no option, but sometimes you really just have to weigh in these options. Is that office of the Senate that necessary?
I want to be very honest with you that those who made our constitution 2010, and I know they are prominent Kenyans and really respected Kenyans, borrowed a lot. When you decide to borrow, adapt what you borrow.
Okay.
Don't just fix what you borrow into the system. And borrow what you think is necessary for us.
Okay.
I think we borrowed a lot from the United States Constitution, but then we forgot that their system has been tried over time and it has worked. So having two houses and trying to designate them the way they are, giving them responsibilities as it were, and creating the discontent that there is between the two as at now. I want to be very honest with you, we do not know, even I in Parliament cannot tell you which is the upper and which is the lower house.
Okay.
Because it's not very clear. Why? Because National Assembly does most of the upper house business.
Jobs.
The Senate does those other things.
Okay.
The senators are elected of a wider scope, the county.
Yeah.
So they really suffer in terms of looking for votes than the members of Parliament. When you come on the other hand, you find members of Parliament make the key decisions. So there's a bit of confusion in that borrowing. So we needed to clean it up a bit and do a better job. Secondly, we are wasting a lot of resources. In doing a law when the two houses must agree. You remember somebody took about 15 legislations that had been done without passing the Senate.
Yeah.
And they were declared null and void. So today, there must be agreement on the law, apart from those distinct ones which must be done by the National Assembly. Any other law which touches on county in whichever way must pass through Senate. And then you must agree. If you don't agree in terms of what the proposals, then you must go for mediation. And then, of course, you have to strike a balance between the two of you. So you waste time.
Yeah.
And
one of the reasons why, and I agree with what it is, actually, one of the reasons why, again, there was a concern on the finance bill, because then largely therein it touches on the question of the Senate, of the county governments and, allocations and all that.
Yeah.
But it did not go through the Senate.
All the money matters do not pass through.
They do not completely. And hence the reason why some people could get some loopholes as to questioning this document.
Correct. Right. So the two houses, in my very considered opinion, is something we need to question. And I don't think it really is of extreme necessity. All members of Parliament come from counties.
Yes.
There's no member of Parliament who would go against the county because
they are voted from the constituency.
They were voted by the same people,
yes.
the same county. So that's something that we need to listen to. Now let's look at what is happening right now, the complications.
Yes.
And of course the questions that we have right now. And I want to refer you to something, the American Constitution that we borrowed from.
Right.
The Cabinet of the United States. I want to address the issue of strangers in cabinet because
yes, that one is a major issue that we have to discuss.
Let me come to that right at this point in time because of the borrowing. Let's speak to the borrowing of the Constitution. And I want to read the American Constitution and listen to it very carefully. The Cabinet of the United States is a body consisting of the Vice President of the United States and the heads of executive branches departments in the federal government of the United States. It is the principal official advisory body of the President of the United States. The President chairs the cabinet, but he is not formally a member of the cabinet. Here, the President chairs the cabinet, and he is a member of the cabinet. The heads of the department appointed by the President are confirmed by the Senate. The same thing we do. The President nominates and brings them to the National Assembly for confirmation. And then it goes on to say that, and the acting, it says that, they are President and confirmed by the Senate, they are members of the cabinet. And acting departmental heads also participate in cabinet matter meetings, whether or not they have been officially nominated for the Senate confirmation. Listen, whether or not they have been officially nominated for the Senate confirmation, they participate in the cabinet. The President may designate heads of the other agencies and non-state actors, confirmed members of the executive office of the President as members of the cabinet. I want to ask you what...
That is article?
This is
because the cabinet speaks in Article 2.
Yes. This is, I think I'm reading under interpretation from Wikipedia. The article talk. Yes.
We'll get to that. We'll get to the bottom of that. All right. Now, what is your argument?
My argument here is we borrowed, and then we borrowed halfway.
Are you saying that we borrowed from the American Constitution?
I'm saying that in view of the current dispensation of this country, the President has got his whole advisory team. He is a person who pays a lot of attention to details. In fact, he will be involved in almost everything to be sure that the right thing is being done. He's overworking. Now, in that respect, at times, he may want the details, not to miss out on the details, to have some of his inner core participating in the cabinet. And that's why...
That reminds me of the
justification. And this is not provided for. When you borrowed, you do not borrow that.
Wait a minute. Why do you argue that, first of all, we borrowed from the United States?
Because it is the same. That's basically what happened.
I mean, and we also understand that governments are run almost in a similar manner. And so there are things that would also look similar, but you have not necessarily borrowed from this bit. And it's fine. You might decide to borrow and you borrow halfway. If you've borrowed halfway, then what is halfway is what becomes law. No, it becomes law in this land. So how do you want to go back and look at what it is that you did not borrow and employ that? And Mheshimiwa, I'll bring this to you. It reminds me of the justification that the DP gave, in the conversation, in the heat of whether we should have CASs or not. And the DP goes ahead to say that sometimes the ministers are overwhelmed and they would need assistance from these CASs. The same thing Mheshimiwa is telling is here, is that the government, the President pays attention to detail, and therefore sometimes he would want some other people to come in and assist him to justify why we should have Malala, we should have Monica Juma, we should have Harriet Chigai and David D sit in these weekly cabinet sessions to justify why perhaps there was need to have CASs to sit in the position and do some of these other things on behalf of CSs. Mheshimiwa.
When you talk of law or constitution, constitution is the overall let me call it a Bible.
Yes.
To govern a country. Okay? That's the overall. Right? Once we compare ourselves with the Americans, where we borrowed the Constitution from, we get it wrong. This argument would work better if we are talking of United States of Africa. If you compare America with Kenya,
the numbers,
population, the size, then I don't know what you're talking about. What we call a state in America is basically
like a country.
It's like a country. So it is those countries, put together. That's why you have Senate from every state. So I would say it is every country in Africa producing one Senate. So it justifies to have them at least to have somebody in cabinet to represent those states. But he has put it very well here, that every member of parliament or senate, they come from a county. So that county is well represented. All right? Number two, When we went for Constitution 2010, Kenyans voted for what is on the book today. And what did we say? We said no assistant ministers. Why did the Kenyans feel that they did not need assistant ministers? During Kibaki time, we were all here, we are not strangers. We had the assistant minister saying, we do not have a job, we only sit in the offices to read papers. We need some work. But they were not, what work? There is no work. So where is that work which is overwhelming a minister today? That he needs assistant in this country? Kenya, how many square kilometers? And how many departments are in one ministry, which a minister cannot cover? I can tell you this member of parliament, he covers, the area he covers is so vast than what the minister is doing in his office.
Is it so? Okay.
Do you have an assistant MP?
No.
So if we have assistant ministers, we should also have assistant members of parliament. We should have assistant MCS. We should have assistant, I don't know what. I think you should also have an assistant.
But you also acknowledge that their dockets speak to what is of the nation.
In that ministry, in a ministry, let me tell you, the work actually is not even done by the minister.
Yeah.
There are experts
very many people,
in that ministry, very competent people in every ministry who does the heavy lifting. The minister is only to be advised, to be told here, this is what is happening. And I pity myself when I hear people taking credit of others. Because to be honest and to be fair, in every ministry, in every department, there are those people who do the heavy lifting of what need to be done for the country to thrive. There are those people who do that.
Yeah.
Those who do, let me call it for the lack of better word, who do donkey work. So it does not justify to say that, I mean, we need this or we need that because the minister is overwhelmed. The minister is briefed on daily basis on what need to be done. If today you are appointed minister, you don't need to sit there for 1 week to understand the ministry. Within 1 day, you have experts who will come and brief you on everything which goes on in that ministry. So when a minister fails to do their job, it is not because they are not well advised.
Yeah.
All right? So what we can't do, we can't defy the Constitution, which guides us. We can't go against the Constitution, which tells us what to do and what not to do.
In the name of...
in the name of, we need... If that is the case, then we have a very simple way of solving this problem. Going to referendum and amend the Constitution and had these people so that president do not have issues when he appoints as assistant minister. If the assistant minister, it's only that they're being baptized to be called CASs. In a real sense, they are assistant ministers. So what we need to do to cure this problem for future is to amend the Constitution so that we don't have this issue. Okay? If the president need to have 20 or 25 or 30 cabinet, or 20 Kenyans, call them Kenyans. I mean that Kenyans seated as cabinet. So that now they align themselves to the Constitution. Then let us amend it and say 20 is not enough.
Yeah.
So that the president can say, or whoever is elected to be the president, we can hang you and say, we need our Secretary General sitting in our cabinet. We need so and so sitting in our cabinet. So let it be in black and white. But the moment it is done in a manner which is not subscribed in the Constitution, you will not only see Omtata, you will see so many people going to court.
And yes, Omtata we
and
have
the people
seen.
will start blaming judiciary. I can't blame the judiciary. Because the judiciary don't make laws. They interpret the laws which are made by us.
Right.
All right? So if the law are very explicit, but another problem is this in Kenya. The law is very clear when it favors you. The moment it is not on your side, it is not clear.
It is.
It is not clear. And I can tell you with example. I have seen it and we have all seen it. The moment the court pronounced itself against either me or other person, the person who has been pronounced against, they say the court is unfair. But the moment it is pronounced itself to your favor, you praise the court. We have seen my good friend Raila Amolo Odinga going to court. And the court pronounced itself, and that is during President Kenyatta's time, says that Kenyatta won the election. What did the Raila do? He went to sue himself against
what it is.
What it is. And today, they are on their rooftop blaming Ruto for doing what is not right. Okay? Kenyatta was there. It is Kenyatta who appointed CSs. Court is in the record pronouncing itself that these CSs positions are unconstitutional. What happened? If I was a CS by then, I would have resigned after the court pronounced. Was there any indecent Kenyan who was resigned after that?
No.
Nobody. They continued. So what am I saying? If today somebody moves to court, do you know those CSs who sat and drew salary that time, they are liable. They can be taken to court and they have to refund that money.
And interestingly, these CASs that have been appointed recently, or nominees, I do not know how best to say, but they have been sworn in, are saying that they're going to proceed to the Court of Appeal. The former governor, deputy governor of Kisii, that is Honorable Joash Maangi, who is under the Ministry of Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, as well says that, well, the courts have not interpreted in the way that it should be. First of all, because they should be responding to the petitioner's, request, which, according to him, is not what it is that the courts have, responded to. That the courts, made their own case and, spoke to that very case, and so they are capable of being challenged at the level of the Court of Appeal. It is quite interesting to watch what is happening, and so here's my topic. The executive says this, the judiciary says that. And like Mheshimiwa says here, perhaps it's not the judiciary to blame.
I would like to also agree with him to an extent that we should not entirely blame the judiciary. They're interpreting what we have as our constitution, but our constitution lacks in one way or another. I would have liked to have the constitutional lawyer you and invited.
Yes.
Because he would have assisted us.
He would have assisted us on this one, that's true. Unfortunately, he sends his
apologies. And telling us whether
yes.
our constitution is really provisioning enough.
Yeah.
Now, let's look at what has been the practice in Kenya. What has been the practice that we used to have ministers and assistant ministers. And during Kibaki's time, a few assistant ministers actually complained. Maybe we did not go to the extent to determine or confirm whether their complaints were as a result of interpersonal relationship, or was it really that the docket did not have work to do. Coming back to today, the practice is that ministers will have to answer questions to Parliament, and the ministers will also have to respond to departmental committees and other, committees. Like right now, we have about more than 40 committees, I think, in the National Assembly. I don't know how many are in the Senate. 20 departmental and others. Now, there could be instances where so many things are happening at the same time.
No.
And the Constitution only allows the minister to go to Parliament, does not allow anyone else. With the position of an assistant minister, maybe the Constitution could have allowed delegation to the assistant minister, but it has not allowed.
Yeah.
If the minister delegates to the principal secretary is seen as the accounting officer, and therefore he cannot be confronted directly because he needs to be under the supervision of the minister. So it is the minister who is supposed to. So there is a lacuna where we need somebody to be responsible of the linkage between the top and the bottom, from the accounting officer to the key decision maker in a given ministry. Now, that position is vacant right now, and that is how Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta found it necessary to have chief administrative secretaries appointed to support. There are some ministries which have a lot of work. Let's be honest. There are some which have a lot of work to do. Such that once these people are appointed, they take about 2 to 3 months to acquaint to the amount of work, the kind of things that have got to be done. Some things are generalities and they're relational, not necessarily technical. Technical issues are done by the technical people and they end there. The technical people are not even good in communicating anything beyond the technical results that they have. So we may need a generalist around here. I want to tell you, give you a very specific example. In the last government, I worked with the 2 CASs, 2 ladies in the Ministry of Agriculture. One of them is Kilimo, JB Klimo, and there's another lady from Embu. I don't remember the name. Now, when JB came in, she was charged with the responsibility of overseeing, or rather, taking over the livestock production department of issues. State department, there are state departments. And with the time, she became such an expert that she could respond to almost anything. So she could actually ably and sufficiently represent the minister. So we did not demand the minister must be there all the time. If the minister writes to Parliament and says, I am delegating this to JB, we were okay with JB because she could answer the questions very well. So in terms of functionality, it is necessary. I want to tell you with a lot of honesty, it is necessary to have an assistant position to the minister.
Would it not also,
a PS cannot be an assistant to the minister.
Right.
A PS is an accounting officer, has got his work from PS going down. PS is semi-technical, general. He basically has to do the delivery. The minister oversees and he links up. So there is sometimes they can be overwhelmed, and sometimes things can go on, because they're always traveling, they're always linking up. Global bodies will not take anybody other than the minister to sign a pact. Then we cannot have a minister signing a pact in Geneva and then required by the Kenyan Parliament and also opening up a show in whatever. So those are some of the things that require an assistant position.
But until then, this is adjusted as to what it is.
Now, I want to come back to his point. His point is very, very clear.
Yeah.
We looked at Kenya as a country and compared it to US, which is
humongous.
It's not a country. It's like a continent.
Right.
Actually, it's a continent. Now, you take the constitution of a continent and compress it into a country and assume that a county like Meru can operate like a state like Minnesota. That's misconception. So I think what we need is to look at our constitution. There are several issues that we need to make very clear and reduce the cost. The government, of course, must not create opportunities for everybody to be employed. The government needs to create an environment for employment to occur.
Right.
For us to be able to create an environment, efficiency must be embraced in everything that we are doing. Use of resources and also generation of those resources. We are not promoting a lot of our generation of resources. There's an issue you brought in which we do not quite address, the issue of spreading out a loan and
that is, and that I had directed to Mheshimiwa, and I think I'll take it back to him so that then we come back to you on that very note. Mr. Director, with your permission, we proceed? All right, we proceed. Mheshimiwa, back to you.
Yes.
And I know the CAS's matter is here, and the fact that someone has gone to court as well to challenge whether we should have Malala seats, in cabinet meetings. We know very well that Okiya Mtata successfully challenged the implementation of the Finance Act, but as it stands right now, fuel prices are up there. So all that we come back to, but then on the question of debt in the country. Do we restructure? How do we make sure that we collect more money such that we won't have to run into more debt and everything? Just how viable is this?
Before we go there, allow me to put some records straight on this issue of the CSs, because it's very pertinent.
Yeah.
It is important to have assistant ministers for any government. It is important. But we missed that. We missed it in our constitution.
We deliberately deleted it.
So if we missed it, and it is not in the constitution, then we cannot have it today.
What if it's about the interest of the people? And I have had some Kenyans speaking to this.
All the interests of the people are guided by the principle of the constitution.
Yes.
The functionality of the constitution.
Yes.
Right? You can have the interest, but it has to be enshrined in the Constitution. If it is not there, it doesn't matter. Everybody would, even me, I would want to be somewhere.
But there's a judge who interprets and goes ahead to say that, well, the 23 are okay, and I find it proper for us to have this. And the other one, or the others say that the whole 50% lot is not, or 100%, in this case 50 CA.
Before we get away from our point.
Yeah.
Or our agenda.
This
is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If the constitution does not provide for a position of a CAS,
it should not be there.
Let us not create it. Because if we create a position of a CAS, let us also create a position of assistant MP. Okay? Let us also create a position of assistant MCA. Let us create a position of assistant something else. But if it is in the Constitution, let us go with it.
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If it is not there, it is not there. The moment you introduce it, then it will be pronounced unconstitutional by any court sitting anywhere. And it doesn't matter who is that judge. You don't need a constitutional lawyer to interpret that for you. It is not there, it is not there. It can be brought by the necessity that we want minister to be assistant. If you do want that, please do what is needful. Go and amend the Constitution and bring in the assistant ministers. Okay. Then you will have no problem. Likewise, when the Constitution demands that we'll have only 23 cabinet ministers or 23 Kenyans sitting as cabinet, the moment you introduce another one, you are running into trouble while you are seeing. Yeah. And you will have not only Waumtata, and I've said it. So many other people will go to court and say, so and so is not supposed to, because the numbers are subscribed in the Constitution. Yeah. If that is the case, we have 29 constituencies in 280 constituencies. Then I'm going to Mwingi and create my mind and have to ask my people to elect me, and I will sneak in parliament. Okay. Okay? And I will say it was a necessity by people of Mwingi for me to come in. So we will be having 281, which is not in the Constitution. Yeah. So let us not argue that way. Let us be precise when it comes to abiding to the law.
All right, fair.
Going back to your question.
One comment on that issue. We have the form and the function. Right. The function can determine the form. We made the form through the Constitution, but we did not try out the Constitution for us to be able to know that it's function. So at this point in time, over the last 15, 17, 16 years now, we have been trying this Constitution. From 2020, yes, yeah, from 2010 to 2023, we have to 13 years. Right. We've been trying this Constitution. And this Constitution is appearing not to work in certain issues. In the first instance, it is and then they are to appoint CASs, which means that we did not conceptualize that the function can criticize or challenge the form. And that's what is happening right now. Now, on the other hand, when it comes to the scope of work and the content of that work to be done, we may not compare the office of a minister with the office of a member of parliament.
Hold it right there. I am told that we have to fix your microphone. A bit of a noise there, so we will come back to you. Yeah. But basically, you can almost guess where Mheshimiwa is headed. But then again, Mheshimiwa will tell you here, there are no limits as to when one is allowed to trigger the conversation on the change of the Constitution, which we have had a couple of times, you know, within this phase, the 13-year phase that we're talking about into the new Constitution. Mheshimiwa, are we even genuine in as much as we acknowledge that constitutions are dynamic in nature?
Definitely constitutions are dynamic in nature, and each country has got its own dynamics. And this is what happens when you run to a situation where you borrow a constitution from another country that you want to implement it in your country, and it does not work. Let us agree, all of us, that this constitution is not working. I saw this in 2014 when I told Kenyans that, you know what? This constitution we have is too expensive for us to maintain, and we will not. And today we are feeling the pinch. Kenyans may not agree with me, but I made my point then, and it is very clear. It is in black and white. What am I saying when I say this? The constitution we have today has a lot of demand.
Okay.
The issue of the counties, which I brought forward. Right. I know Kenyans want more counties. Even today, if you ask me, I'll say I want Mwingi, where I come from, to be a county. Yeah. But when you go back to your pen and paper...
That has been a conversation. Yes, they have pushed.
There's a push for that. Yes, I would want Mwingi to be a county. But the question is, are we able to maintain those 48 or 50 or so counties in our country? Are Kenyans able? And that's why we are now being pushed to your question about our debts. Because we need money to maintain our country, including the counties.
Right.
We borrow to pay to give counties money.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the issue of our debts, because that's a very pertinent issue, and it needs a lot of thinking, I think each and every country in the world, including America, they have debts. All right? Yes. And we should not shy off because of having debts. If we have debts, we need to know how are we going to manage our debt and what amount of money we are collecting. Is it good enough to pay our debts and to sustain our economy?
Yeah.
All right? If it is not, then we should not shy away. We keep on restructuring our loans.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to do.
Okay.
It is not to tax people. We are going to tax people until they cannot pay no more.
Yeah.
Because you need this, you need the country Kenya. And for the country Kenya to thrive, there must be Kenyans. If these people are going to die because of Costco, they cannot afford food, then what are you going to govern?
Right.
You need people in this country. People need to live. Life is more important than what we are borrowing. Life is more important than money. If you borrow to make the health sector better, then you better do it. If you borrow to make infrastructure, roads and everything better, then you better do it.
Right.
If you are borrowing to make sure that children go to school, then you better do it. All right?
Right.
But the moment you shy away from it, then you tell Kenyans it is you who is going to pay, and the Kenyans you're asking them to pay, they cannot afford their living, then what are you doing?
Neither here or there. Mheshimiwa, we come back to you. I'm sure your mic should be okay by now, right?
Hi,
And we cut your line of thought. I hope you could gather that.
Yeah, I've heard Mheshimiwa very well. And I want to agree with them on one thing, that restructuring debts is a good issue. The last government, I was in the Budget and Appropriation Committee.
Yeah.
The minister came and gave us a long presentation on how they would like to restructure debts. First of all, pay the commercial loans that are locally borrowed, clear them off, retire them, and then have more concessional loans which are long-term and some which are very low interest rates. And he was trying to negotiate for us to move from calculating debt as a percentage of GDP to having debt as an absolute figure.
Okay.
And that we allowed. But then we had been told, because the debt was around 4.8 trillion, it was going to be up to 6.4 trillion. But what did we end up to? We ended up with close to 10 trillion of debt. And the retirement of the commercial loans was not done. So what probably we need to call for here is honesty and responsibility. If we say that we need long-term loans, let us go for long-term loans. The possibility for restructuring loan is clear, and it's also there. The government can restructure loan. But for those are the long-term concessional loans. They have conditions. The commercial loans must be retired initially because they are very expensive in the first place, and they are local. Now, as we think about that as a possibility, because it takes time, the economy needs to keep on moving. We need to keep on growing as a country. We need to keep on meeting the basic needs. And that is why now the finance bills. Every year there's a finance bill. This is not the first finance bill that we've ever had. There's always a finance bill. And also every government has got its own manifesto. And this manifesto delivered, therefore, basically puts the government on the map as having done 1, 2, 3, 4, which is new and different from the other governments that have been there. So we cannot say that we should not pay taxes. Kenya can get money through different ways. Number one, through importation, through export and import. Trade, we can get money. Government raises revenue through trade. Government raises revenue through the changes in the currency. If our currency becomes stronger, we raise revenue. Government raises revenue through philanthropy, and we may have people like Bill Gates who may want to support certain parts of government. If you get rid of a problem somewhere which probably would have been funded by a government, you are supporting the economy. You can also basically go for bilateral and multilateral lending. So getting loans is another way a government can raise revenue. The fifth way a government can raise revenue is by taxes through the national support. This is domestic plus, well, it could also be international depending on what whatever is brought from outside. Now, when you do levies and taxes and you can raise revenue, this is revenue that you can be sure of because those others are dependent. Trade is dependent on what you are selling and buying.
Assurance, then, in this case,
particular one, you are sure that you can get so much money if you adjust 1, 2, 3.
And therefore, there are projections as to that, because one of the reasons why Okiya Omtata, is successful in his challenge is that he says, we were not given projections as to what you, as a government, intend to collect after raising, after incorporating the housing tax, after incorporating this, after taxing this and that and everything. Where are the projections that eventually, after these adjustments, this is the match that we're likely to get?
I want to agree with Okiya Omtata. Rarely can I agree with him, but in this part, to a certain extent, to the extent that we have not been given those projections. But let's look at what happened just in this particular process. In the last 1 month, initially we were talking about a housing levy, which is a contribution from the employer and the employee.
Right.
And therefore this money would have been put into a fund, and this fund would also be invested. And the investment of this fund would basically mean that the employee would gain at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That was rejected. There were more than 1,080-something people, petitions that were brought to the committee. And the committee had to reason out, instead of now going that direction, because some people in private sector are risking losing their jobs. And I remember seeking to know exactly what would the government do to secure jobs, especially in the private sector. And there was supposed to have been some discussion with the private sector to look at which other ways do we. So there is issue of impatience. It was all very well planned. There would have been discussions to see which areas can we now do concessioning so that private sector is relieved on one side and therefore sustains job for those who are already working, so that the government keeps on moving. And then the individual benefits. But Kenyans were very impatient because Okiya Omtata's and others who are also in Azimio and they want to demonize this, came up so strongly. So what was the final decision? People said they would rather have a tax than have the investment. And that's why the tax came in.
Said? And here
it is the petitions. This came from public participation through the petitions, yes.
All right, Mheshimiwa.
As Kenyans, allow me to say this, and I'm sorry if I offend anyone. As Kenyans, we don't get our acts together. We don't get our acts correct. If we do get our act correct, we will not be where we are today. This country is a very rich country. But do we consider ourselves as a rich country and do what is right? When it comes to money issues, money matters, I would want you to ask yourself, how much do we lose to outsiders? Okay? How much do we lose to outsiders? Talk of multinational companies in this country. How much do we give out? And I'll give you a very good example. And I have no problem if somebody wants to sue me, let them sue me tomorrow. How much does Safaricom give out to outsiders? Safaricom is 40% owned by Vodafone. All right? Ask yourself, how much did Vodafone invest in Kenya that they have not recovered up to today? That every year we give them 40% of our collection. They take it out. It goes. It's just one company. Talk of so many companies in this country, whereby outsiders get the chunk of revenue collected to their countries. And how much do they invest to take out what they take? When you hear Safaricom declaring 250 billion profit. You need to calculate 40% is going to Britain. All right? That is the money which could have been used in this country. I like one country called Ethiopia. They said our telecommunication is going to be handled by the nation. telecommunication in Ethiopia, and that is what has built the railway. That's what has done the roads. Get your facts. In Ethiopia.
And I know in Ethiopia, even getting a SIM card is
Yes.
quite a hassle because you
Yes.
have to go through.
It is controlled by the
government.
government.
Yeah.
When I say we don't get our act correct, look at our telecom. What did we do with our telecom company? Which was Posta before, then it was changed, I don't know, to Telecom, then it was toasted to Orange, then it came back again to whatever, then it was sold for 6 billion, then it was sold during election, which is a government entity, which should be doing better than Safaricom and Airtel. Airtel is an Indian company. How much do they make and how much do they get outside? So we Kenyans spend our money outside our country.
Can we then also agree?
We don't make our ends meet.
And we also have to give it to Safaricom because of the magnitude of, taxes also that they pay to the country. Largely, you have had them acknowledging that.
That collection which goes to Safaricom should remain here.
Okay.
Should remain here. When you ban importation of goods, when you put high taxes on importation of goods, you also need to consider how many people are taking out money from Kenya. And you evaluate that. And you use that money for this country.
Right.
Okay? Allow me to be a Kenyan. That's what I'm saying. If Safaricom was 100% Kenyan, we may not be having this problem.
Here. Well, and of course, we would get into details of getting to understand
companies
the facts behind
Kenyans. We will not be where we are today.
Yes, we should
and
get
that's
the
what I'm
facts
saying. We
behind the
don't get
percentage.
our act correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, we also have to get to a point of acknowledging that maybe there are things that we need to fix locally. And it brings us to your point originally when you said that the cost of living, perhaps that is hitting us so hard here, is probably not an experience that other countries are having. And therefore, in as much as we would want to look at this problem or the difficult times as a global problem, we also agree that locally,
let us not demonize.
Let us not demonize and also get
the finance bill.
Yes.
I think we are making a mistake as Kenyans. We need to measure our levels of patriotism as a country based on what Mheshimiwa is saying. We are not really patriotic as a country. Our own. If I asked you, do you have an orange line? Do you have?
Yes.
How many times do you watch ABC and so on? So there are these things that we need to look at very, very seriously and ask ourselves very difficult questions. I think there must be effort by the government to try and promote patriotism. We are borrowing too much. We have borrowed even culture. We have actually borrowed ourselves away.
Yeah.
Yet we are living here. We need to be realistic. I will just pick one example, and Ethiopia is becoming a popular example in this particular session. Coffee consumption. Kenya has the best coffee in the world.
Which you don't consume.
Kenya does not consume the coffee that we have. It is the best in the world, but you don't consume. So Ethiopia is probably, they also have some very good coffee, Arabica. But the levels of consumption of coffee in Ethiopia is very high. So we really need to be patriotic. There are small, simple things that we need to fix around here, and then we will be okay. Now, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
And I want to touch on this issue of Safaricom. And
largely we cannot, yes.
Let me
it is also fair that we get someone from their end in defense.
When Safaricom changes their rates slowly, although very little, in a very little percentages, how many Kenyans complain? There's slight change in the petrol. Every Kenyan is up in arms. So we need to be patriotic. We are lacking patriotism as a country.
Yeah.
Now, petrol issue needs to be regulated. We need to feel the pain so that you can become normal. Every weekend I'm going to Meru. I'll be alone, probably with my driver and about the gun. That's it. Drive a big car to Meru. I told you there was a country I went and the Minister for Finance was riding a bicycle. So we are very inconsiderate as a country. We won't drive the biggest cars because we are parking. In Europe, they look for the smallest. When somebody is sitting on the steering, he is on the back seat, holding the steering from the back seat. Those are the kind of cars they are driving right now. The least consuming cars because fuel is not cheap. It's not that it is cheap. It's expensive. So we need to start being realistic. Using public transport. If you found me in a KBS, would it not be a piece of news that evening?
It will be.
It will be the news
suddenly run.
This guy is so, I don't know what he's doing. He's mad.
Yeah.
So we need to be realistic as a country. We need to come back and ask ourselves, are we human? That person living in a paper bag is as human as you are. If you lost blood and it was near, he would give you. So we are all the same at the end of the day. So let's look at how can we improve the livelihood of everyone. How can we bring up those who are at the bottom of the pyramid?
Okay.
And we need to know how many they are.
All right.
And there are very many ways of finding out and planning for them.
All right, and I have an assignment on looking at the 40% that you speak to remittance abroad from companies that are within, and we also have to agree that in as much as we say that there are a lot of investors in the country, we have also managed to scare so many of them away. And
that issue of investors, I think we need to be careful how we handle it, because the world is integrated.
Right.
And we allow opportunities based on the cost-benefit analysis.
Right.
We see what do we get, what do we give out. And at the end of the day, we are also challenged as a country. There is a cost to buying investment, and there is a cost to promoting our own, we buying our own.
Right.
If we promoted, and I want to be very on record here, if we promoted the Nyayo pioneers, today we would be producing cars in Kenya.
That's true.
But we killed it so vehemently. We were so mad about it. It was our product, but we were so annoyed. That boy can come up with.
Let me say,
yes, as we sum it up.
Kenya is not short of investors. It's only that we don't support our own investors. Go to cement industry. We have so many people who are doing so well in the cement industry, who are supplying Kenyans, and who say that we do not have Kenyans who can invest in telecommunication and thrive like Vodafone. Who said we do not have Kenyans who can invest in breweries and thrive? We had Keroche. Who killed Keroche? Is it people from America?
No.
It is us who killed Keroche. She was doing very well. We killed her with the taxation. All right? We did what we could to make sure that she closed the shop. All right? We have a lot of Kenyans would want to put their money here. The billionaires we have in this country, their money is not here. Why is that money not here in this country? It is outside. Now, as we put our money outside, then other people come and put their money in here, then they take it out, then when we are poor, we complain. Why are we complaining? Let us invest in our country. Let us encourage investors. Let us encourage drinking, not Coca-Cola, but that Afia thing. Allow me to drink, I don't know, Mursik, as opposed to something coming from I don't know where. Okay? Allow me to do that.
It's basically what the president is trying to do.
Once we do that, we will build this country. But the moment the outsiders see opportunity, that's the Kenyans are sleeping.
Okay.
And there's an opportunity there where you can do this and this and that. Actually, I support, there was a bill which came in whereby we said any tender of less than $1 billion, let it be done by a Kenyan. I would say any tender less than 10 billion, let it be done by a Kenyan.
Wow.
Okay? All this go everywhere. The roads are being done by Chinese. And the engineers, let me tell you, the engineers are Kenyans. Those are the ones seated in those offices. The Chinese, they just come there to think, and nothing else. They give us nothing. Kenyans are the ones doing the work. Let us believe, Kenyans, let us wake up and believe in ourselves.
They have given us money and a lot of
We don't believe in ourselves. Instead of producing engineers, somebody told me, we are producing pastors.
Well, I know this is quite a Pandora's box. We would not want to open that, but some truth in what it is that you gentlemen are saying, but equally, there needs to be a balance to strike on this very matter. And yes, for the records, Keroche well is not totally dead, but we agree that there are a lot of difficulties that revolve around these court battles, as to the question of tax. And so, gentlemen, you'll allow me to close at this very point in the best interest of time. So we also shift to a different conversation, but I have to appreciate your presence here. Thank you so much, Honorable Captain Joe Mutambu, former Member of Parliament of Mwingi, for always creating time to speak to the people of Kenya. Kenya. You know, your commentary is quite noble and very important towards the growth of the nation, as well as Honorable John Mutunga, who's a Member of Parliament of Tigania West. We acknowledge your presence and appreciate you this morning, and looking forward to host you some more. We keep having this conversation. If you're just joining us, our social media platforms, TV47KE